As the fighting rages on, there's a growing rift between the Kremlin and the head of the Russian mercenary group Wagner. Yevgeny Prigozhin is refusing to sign a decree that would bring his fighters under the sway of Russia's defense ministry. Prigozhin has repeatedly criticized Moscow's top military brass since the war began. And for more on all of this, we're joined by Dominique Trinquand. He's former head of the French military mission to the UN and NATO. Thanks so much for being with us here on France 24. First of all, what exactly is Ukraine up against as it begins this counteroffensive? How strong are Russian forces, and how long could this counteroffensive last?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I think we've got two fights, the fight on the media and the real fight on the ground. The fight in the media, on the Russian side, you see pictures of weapon system, Ukrainian weapon system destroyed by Russian. On the Ukrainian side, we saw villages which are liberated. We don't know exactly what's happening on all the ground. What we know is that the offensive, the Ukrainian offensive has started. Now Mr. Zelensky is just saying that. We know that there are three axes, mainly Zaporizhzhia, Donetsk and Bakhmut, and we know that the Ukrainians are advancing. As far as they are advancing, we don't know. We are waiting the time when there will be a rupture, a break in the Russian offensive, and we will see that in the next week probably, and then we'll know if the offensive will be successful.
Do you expect this to be a long, protracted fight?
All depends on the reaction of the Russian. If the Ukrainians are able to break through the defense of the Russian and go behind the defenses, we don't know what will happen to the Russian forces. Will they withdraw very quickly or not? But anyway, this is exactly what the Ukrainian forces will try to do, is to rupture the defense of the Russian forces and to try to have a major effect on all the defenses. That doesn't mean that the attack will be on the front line. It will be probably on 2 or 3 different sites, but that can disrupt seriously the Russian defense system.
Is there pressure on the part of the Ukrainians when it comes to international support? For example, if there's a change in leadership in the White House next year, it may not have the same backing as it has now.
Yes, exactly. That's why probably the Ukrainians want to have a victory during the summer, because they don't know what will happen in the US. Anyway, if the US are changing, I'm pretty sure that Europe will not change, because it's at stake for Europe. You know, it's the defense of Europe. So I think they need to have a victory during the summer. But anyway, there will be a long time support for the Ukrainian.
Well, NATO joint air exercises begin today in Germany, and we're going to talk to our correspondent in Berlin about that coming up. You know, it's being billed as the biggest air exercise in the alliance's history. How do you think Vladimir Putin is viewing this?
Vladimir Putin is looking at NATO as the impossible enemy. For him, it's impossible to fight NATO. And I think the air power of the Russian army is very low currently. You've got only missile strike from very long range from the Caspian Sea. But over Ukraine, look at the sky. You've got no aircraft. So on the other side, NATO is showing that they've got an air power, and it's in addition to the land power. And so it must deter Russia from any action against NATO.
Well, as mentioning before we introduced you, the head of the Russian mercenary group Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he's refusing to sign a decree that would bring his fighters under the sway of Russia's defense ministry. How do you see this rift between the Kremlin and Prigozhin playing out? And does it mean anything in the end?
I mean, it's just amazing. How can a real state, accept the position of Mr. Prigozhin? I think it just, the ambition of Mr. Prigozhin is such that he can talk like it is doing now. But in a normal state, nobody will accept that. So I think that it's very dangerous, because we can have fights inside the Russian army if there is a destabilization at the head of the state. And so it is very dangerous for Russia future.
How do you think the Kremlin is viewing him?
I think that now the Kremlin is viewing Mr. Prigozhin as a danger because he's really in competition with the Russian army, and the Russian army is the base of the Russian state. So I think now Mr. Putin, even if Mr. Prigozhin was a friend a long time ago, now is in danger with Mr. Prigozhin.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Dominique Trinquand, former head of French military mission to the UN. Thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.